How is God using you? This is a tribute to George the Animal Steele. Remember George the Animal Steele from wrestling back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s? Just showing some, my wife and I were showing some old highlights about professional wrestling when we were kids, in the late, I guess the early 80s and mid 80s with Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Just the whole, it's just this Roddy Piper. It's just fun. And showing the boys, just, we have a good time chuckling. And remember the old Russian guy? Turns out the Russian guy wasn't really Russian. He was like, I think from Croatia. Actually, he ended up voting for Trump in 2016. It's pretty cool. But it's funny. George the Animal Steele actually had a master's degree. He was a teacher. He was actually quite a smart guy. But I just read this nuts. It's nuts. Let me just show you. Let me show you. Watch this. This is fantastic. Here he is, George Animal Steele, Jim Myers. All right.
You might wonder why I'm all smiles and happy today, but it's very simple. If you're watching this, I am dead and I am with Jesus. Bye bye.
Oh man, that's fantastic. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you something though. The guy was real quick. Just let me tell you a story. So he got his girlfriend pregnant in high school. They got married and they stayed together for 51 years. Um, Man, when you know Jesus, man, just the happiness and joy it can bring. Doesn't mean it will bring, but it can bring of the love and relationship you have with Jesus. It's amazing to me. And we're gonna. I want to share a little about George Amble Steele's. I'll share with you his backstory when he was a kid. It's actually things could have gone a whole lot different if that makes sense. Things could have gone a whole lot different, but he was being used, you know what I'm saying, by God. God had a purpose for him, and he later found the purpose. So let me share with you a couple things here real quick. Let me pause this real quick. Check this out. Listen to what he says here.
Uh, Everything was really great and going well until school started in the kindergarten. Everybody's expecting big things out of me because of the memory, but I could not learn, and nobody understood what was going on. My dad was really frustrated because I look at him as a little league parent type thing, only with an education. He never had an opportunity for an education, so he was really looking forward to his son's getting an education. It's the number one priority. And here I am having a struggle in reading and writing. Kids would laugh at me, go in front of the class and ask me to read Run, Spot, Run, and I couldn't read it. Nobody knew why. And just, it was like I was really a special ed, and I was. And then my parents also told me never to get in a fight. Never fight with anybody because I was bigger and I could hurt somebody real bad. My dad had a glass eye, and I have a feeling that he might have lost his eye in a fight. So anyhow, I was looked at as a big, strong baby that kids made a lot of fun out of because of my learning situation and my running home crying. Well, one day all that changed. I was about 11, 12 years old, and I went across the street from our home into the Cost School playground. And I'd taken a bucket of water with a ladle for the guys to have a drink. When they got done, they took what was left and poured it in my head and laughed at me as I went home, crying. And I walked in the door, and my mother had had enough. She grabbed a pretty good sized stick. She said, "Would you rather fight me or them?" Neither. She took me to the playground and said, "Jimmy's here to fight, and here they come." They're running with big laughs on it because I'd never been in a fight in my life. There was a chance for them to beat me up again. The first one there was Mickey Fulton, who was a bully. And the fight commenced, and it lasted about 15 seconds, and he was out of there. Next was Billy Hinton and Pruitt, and two or three of the guys. And I filtered through them pretty quick. And very quick, the 10 or 15 guys that were there filtered down to just me and my mom. They'd left. That was my first success in life. In anything beyond.
All right. So Jim was 11, and he was, the dunce, wearing the dunce cap essentially. and because it turns out he has dyslexia. He went on to have a master's degree in education. Actually, it's funny because apparently when he first started with Vince McMahon in the Worldwide Wrestling, Federation, they were doing a promo in a gym. George Animal Steele was very articulate in terms of the sales pitch for the wrestling, and Vince McMahon said, "Oh no, that's not the role we have for you. What we don't want you to do that." I guess George was like offended because Vince was like, "No, you're making too much sense. We don't want you to make too much sense. Remember what your role is here," being basically a moron. And Jim said, "What do you want me to do?" Da, da, da. And Vince said, "Yes, exactly." And then that's where the George Animal Steele. So we just played that, eating the taking off the turnbuckle and eating the stuff in there, the stuffing in the turnbuckle. But he was a crusader for Christ, man, and he overcame dyslexia. But think about it, from his whole elementary, he said it's sad, man. He said he had no friends, he had no social life. His whole elementary school was an outcast. And then when he went to junior high, because he was pretty big, the coaches were looking forward to him, being an athlete, and that's when he started to kind of find himself. And I guess he lettered in all 4 sports in all 4 years of high school, 16 letters, which is pretty unheard of. But he still had no social life. But he was, by then he was a jock, so he had some friends. But just think his formative years, man, nothing. I mean, you can easily see, what if he wasn't big? You know what I'm saying? What if he was just a small kid and he couldn't fight? So he I don't say lucked out, but he had the advantage of being big and athletic, so he was able to overcome the formative years of basically K through 5 or 6th grade, up until he was about 11 years old, and overcome the hostility that he was certainly developing as people looked down on him and made fun of him, beat him up actually. And then as a high school man, he got his lady friend pregnant. You know what I'm saying? And it's just, the story's pretty interesting. It's just a story for everyone. And I don't know what my story is. I don't know what your story is, what God's calling us to do. But everyone has a calling. And the issue is, just think, if it wasn't for athletics, we'd never know. Who knows what would happen to George Animal Steele? You know what I'm saying? And just a guy like that playing a role, he brings joys to people's life, man. But then you look into him, and I'm sure when he was chatting with children who were struggling, because he became a teacher, believe it or not, and he had a unique way of teaching and recognizing people's disabilities. And it's, there is, when you have dyslexia, it's not even a disability so much, it's just a different way of learning. And you think about all the stuff that your trials and tribulations, well, maybe they're for a reason, right? Maybe those are for a reason, for you to be able to use those trials and tribulations to help other people. Don't overlook that opportunity. Don't overlook that, because, sadly, I think of all the people with dyslexia who didn't have a second shot like George did, or Jim Myers. I think his name Jim Myers. It's sad, because how many people actually were out there with dyslexia that were brilliant, but just were relegated to the back bench, essentially. Yeah, it's too bad. But that's the growing pains humanity goes through. Now we know better, and now we can use the advantages of people with dyslexia, like my own boy. You know what I'm saying? It's anyway. Long story short, God has a purpose for you. I don't know what it is, but think about it. What are the trials and tribulations that you've been through that you can use to help be a crusader for Christ? I think it's important. All right, we'll see you. Love to hear your thoughts. Oh, actually, do you have memories of professional wrestling? Oh man, just good times. All right, we'll see you.